Then again, we have England, Austria, and Russia uniting against Napoleon's France. Russian forces begin to move up to join with Austrian forces, but before they could join forces, Napoleon attacks Austria. Then he defeats the Russians. Then the Prussians attack and he defeats them too. Napoleon marches through Berlin, the master of most of Europe. And to quote Napoleon, he says at this point, "I have come to realize that men are not born to be free. Liberty is a need felt by a small class of people whom nature has endowed with nobler minds than the mass of men." And that's Grand Sovereign King of the Universe, Emperor Napoleon. At that point, he begins to declare his brothers and sisters and family members all types of kings and queens and royalty. For example, his brother Joseph becomes the king of Naples, Naples. Louis Bonaparte becomes the king of Holland. And his sister becomes the Duchess of Balzac. At the close of 1806, Austria and Prussia had surrendered yet again. They don't really mean surrender, they just do that. And then they attack Napoleon later on. But Russia and England remain all powerful enemies. So Napoleon wages economic war versus England in a continental blockade, forbidding all European nations from trading with the British Isles. So Napoleon he waged an economic war against Britain in the form of a continental blockade, forbidding all European nations from trading with Britain, from trading with the British Isles. Napoleon making the terms that nobody could trade with England is pretty harsh demand, because England has everything to trade because they dominate the world's trade routes. So Napoleon marches his troops into Poland. Russia attacks. There's heavy losses on both sides, and he invades Spain because Spain has been breaking the law and trading with England. So Napoleon wants to defeat Spain and place Spain under his rule as part of his empire. The Spanish revolt and a war takes place, and France occupies Spain for 5 years, unable to break the will of the Spanish people. In 1811 to 1812, the Tsar Alexander of Russia refused to acknowledge France's blockade and wants to trade with England because the blockade was ruining the Russian economy, obviously. So I want to remind you that the Sons of Liberty also proposed a blockade with England and America during the Revolutionary War. So it's no surprise that their sister club, the Jacobins, would suggest the very same thing during the quote-unquote French Revolutionary War. That's why George Washington always promoted trade with England, because he didn't want to commit economic suicide and to hurt his own country. So Napoleon invades Russia. He takes 600,000, his army of 600,000 men, Poles, Germans, Italians, and says, I'm going to go invade Russia right before the winter. Moscow is set on fire, and then Napoleon has to go back home to France, where he gets caught out in the wilderness during the Russian winter. And the Russians begin to attack from all sides when his troops are frozen, eating horse meat and without supplies. So Napoleon watched as his army died. He abandons his troops and heads back to France. In the fall of 1813, the Allies closed in against France, and he loses more and more battles. In 1814, Napoleon hears that the Allies have invaded France. They have 350,000 allies, That's everyone else in Europe against France, and France is 85,000 French troops. And he tries to order a march on Paris, but his French generals refuse to fight anymore. And he renounces his throne in 1814. So Vatican declares him so he gets banished. They put Napoleon in a little English vessel, little English warship, and they ship him over to the island of Elba, where the Vatican declares him Emperor of the island of Elba, and forever their special little guy. You see how they fuck with you? These little titles are like mock titles. It's all game to them. It's all a bunch of bullshit. Yes, little Napoleon, now you're the Emperor of the island of Elba. How cute. You see how they act? So he's Emperor of the island of Elba. But there was still one more act that the Vatican had planned for him, and that was Napoleon's grand escape from the island of Elba. It's not too hard because he had a bunch of ships docked there. And I think he takes the same English warship that dropped him off there, has been hanging around there. He just jumps back on that ship and he magically escapes back into France. So I don't think that's too tough. It's like saying, I escaped from prison when a fucking limo drove up and picked me up, after they opened the door for me. So it's all set up. He runs back into France, and there's a bunch of French soldiers, I think, that were supposedly there to stop him. And he yells out, if one of you want to kill your emperor and your general, do it now. And all the Frenchies start shouting. And then there's the Battle of Waterloo. Finally, it's England versus France. So England thought they were pretty smart, didn't you? You thought you were pretty slick there, right? You're just going to sit back and watch Napoleon fight everybody else. And then when he's weak, you're going to jump on him and beat the dog shit out of him, right? And who was waiting in the background to beat the dog shit out of you? Who was there to claim your whole country after the Battle of Waterloo? The Vatican.